We are going live right now, setting up our meeting. And we're still setting up our meeting. And oh, there's some people next door who are being very loud. Okay, we're live. Everybody, hold on. Let me get us back to where I need us to be. And great. So I am here with my new friend, Megan Chance. Hey, Megan. But before I let her talk, so I got things I got to get off my head. First, Southern California in the beginning of January is not Florida at the beginning of January. I'm just discovering this. This is thus my fleece jacket out here. But the light is so much better out here. And if I go inside, I automatically look my age. Out here, just kind of filters it out. So, Megan, you and I are new friends. I'd heard about you forever and ever, but we have a mutual friend, and I'm not telling anybody that it's Kristen Hanna, but it's Kristen Hanna. And that's how we've got to know each other, but it's only been through Zoom. So you're in the Pacific Northwest, right?
Yes, just outside of Seattle, yeah.
But we have roots in the same place, in Central Ohio.
That's right, in Central Ohio, Lancaster, yeah.
It's just so funny. Lancaster, Ohio is a town that's not too far from Columbus. And Megan and I were having this conversation. And this is like one of the first times we were together. And all of a sudden we realized that we were both had roots in Lancaster, Ohio, which is a beautiful little town.
It is a beautiful little town.
Yeah. So book list calls your writing magical and haunting. Are you going to own that?
Yeah, I'm going to own that. I'll take that. I'll take it. Absolutely.
I was going through your biography yesterday, and you've written a bunch of stuff. I mean, you actually wrote a young adult novel, and you've written historical romance and historical fiction. So right off the bat, tell us what you see as the difference between historical romance and historical fiction.
Well, in historical romance, the focus is absolutely on the hero and heroine and their interior journey, I mean, their emotional journey to each other. And in historical fiction, it's much broader than that. It doesn't focus on a relationship necessarily, though it can. And it doesn't focus on a love relationship necessarily, though it can. It's just a much broader canvas to work on. So you're dealing with a lot of different relationships. You're dealing, I think, much more with a character's relationship with themselves, or a character's relationship with people outside of a love relationship. And so it gives you just a broader canvas to work on. But you can have a love story within that, certainly.
My guess is, and we don't know each other really well, but my guess is historical romance was feeling probably a little too confining to you. And am I right, or am I putting words in your mouth?
No, I think you're right. And I think also that for me, historical romance, I always felt like a sort of a square peg in a round hole, that I think part of it too was that my vision of the world is a little bit darker than sort of romance wanted me to be. I mean, I always sort of had this idea that no matter who you were, you kind of deserved love. And not only that, that sometimes love was the most frightening thing for people, that it was really scary, and that it was the darkest moment, for example, that it could be for some people the thing they were most frightened of. And that was not necessarily at the time I was writing it, it wasn't really a popular thought. And it kind of led me into some very dark places. And a lot of romance readers don't want dark places. And that isn't to say that there aren't a lot who do. I happened to be a reader of romance that did actually like the darker ones. But at that time, it was trending much more towards lighter, more, laughter, more of Julie Garwood, more. Well, you actually had some darker ones in your earlier days, which well, if you look at stuff like, Hot Shot, or you look at The
Even
one
Dance
before
Away
that.
with Me has
Yes.
moments like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved those. So those were the kinds of ones that I was liking. And when it started to go lighter, there was really no place for me. And yes, I was feeling constrained.
I take issue with your word darker in terms of your work. What I see is deeper. Um, and what you're talking about gives so much more churn to the relationships in the book. So I feel like your path, and we're going to talk specifically about A Splendid Ruin, but I'm not ready to get there yet, and I can't wait. But anyway, taking my time. Um, that it really lets you explore the characters and the conflicts with the characters. That you do that really, really well. It's not just plot in your books. You're going deep into the characters. So anyway, I reject your word dark. And
Oh,
I like the word
okay.
deep, but that's just me.
Well, deep is a good word too. I mean, deep is a good word too, but I do think that, I have this sense that, sort of the subjugation of the human soul is bad, no matter who it is or what it is. And that has been sort of a theme, sort of, I think, throughout all of my work, and this sense that no matter who you are or what terrible things you've done, um, you have to live and deal with those consequences. And
Yeah.
that has been sort of something that I keep circling back to. How do you deal with those consequences? What what do you do? How do you come to terms with that? And that tends to be, I don't know, a little bit darker. I think a little bit, maybe deeper is a better word.
And a little more complex, really.
Yeah.
So tell me who you are in terms of your background and what drew you to writing, because I don't know your background story very well.
I'm the oldest of four girls. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. My grandparents and all my relatives essentially lived in Lancaster. So I've been there. They were farmers and construction people and stuff like that. And I knew I wanted to be a writer when I was 6 years old, and I announced it to everybody. And I was a kid who loved to read, and I would do things like, okay, this week is going to be, Ocean Week. And I would read everything I could about the ocean. This week is going to be Dinosaur or Prairie Week. And I would read everything I could about it. And so I became like this huge know it all for my family. It's like, oh,
Oh,
you need to know something, talk to Megan. She knows everything, you
you're,
know.
you're
And,
supposed
and
to
then,
love this.
it's very irritating to my
Uh-huh.
family and to many people who know me, actually.
Uh,
Um, but but I just always knew that was what I wanted to do, and that was what I wanted to be. And when I was in high school, I mean, I was always writing stories. I was always walking around the yard telling stories to myself, kind of acting them out in my head. And when I went into high school, I had a really great English teacher who um, who set me up with a published writer to study with a published writer. And here we had moved to Olympia, Washington by then. And I was studying with a published writer once a month in high school. And so I went to her house, and it was an independent study. And she taught me just these amazing things. I mean, here I am, I'm like 17 years old. And she's teaching me like I'm, a college student, and I'm thinking, oh my God, she hates everything I do. But
right.
like the lessons she taught me about point of view and about really um, understanding that truth is in emotion, that it isn't in plot and it isn't in all these other things, it's in emotion. And those lessons stay with me. I mean, the stuff that she taught me was so valuable. And I realize now, just how amazingly lucky I was to have this teacher who sort of, I mean, she called me actually a couple years ago because I'd lost track of her. And she said, you were so far beyond anything I could do for you.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't, I mean, at the time, I didn't even think to say what an amazing thing that was. You know,
Yeah.
it just felt like normal, like everybody did that. Like I didn't get how outstanding or lucky I was.
So you got to actually thank her for doing this for you.
Yes,
God bless those good English teachers,
they're
really. That's
amazing.
the truth. I want to backtrack. So when you were younger, walking around telling stories in your head, did you put yourself in the middle of the story, or were these stories about other people?
They were always about other people, and it would be things like, you know, like I was a big, I think I read, you know, the Three Musketeers when I was, I don't know, 13 or 14. And so I would rewrite the story in my head, you know, and I loved the Three Musketeers. So like I would walk around and I would rewrite it in my head. And I would, you know, I did that with a lot of things, with Romeo and Juliet, with, you know, King Arthur was another huge one. Merlin, you know, was a big, so it was just sort of me, you know, I mean, I remember Anya Seton's Catherine.
Oh yeah.
I rewrote that book in
Wow.
notebooks, notebook after notebook. I just took it and rewrote it. And that was sort of, you know, how I did it. It was just like taking these stories that I knew and loved, and
Mhm.
I just wanted to recapture the feeling they gave me
Yeah.
in kind of my own words over and over and over again.
Didn't you love Anya Seton's books? Oh my gosh. My first
Darkness.
one was Dragonwyck, and that
Oh,
but
yeah.
that
Yeah.
book so upset me because I wanted the guy she married, who was the villain, I wanted him to turn out to be the hero, and replayed that story in my head the way I wanted it many times. Well, the difference between what you were playing in your head and me is that I was mainly playing in my head like my Academy Award Oscar speech when I won Best Actress. I wasn't rewriting Three Musketeers. So what did you study in college?
Well, that's a good story, actually. I went into college thinking I was going to be an English major.
Mhm.
Now, imagine me. I'm 18. I'm spoiled beyond all reason. I know I'm talented. I'm arrogant as hell. You know, I go in there. I do what my first class is, you know, like 201, you know, drama and composition or something. I go in there. I do what I have been used to doing my entire, you know, schooling, and I write the paper on the play the night before, thinking, you know, like I can do this in my sleep, right? She gives me a D. I've never had a
It's
D
up.
on an English paper. Oh my God, you could have shot me with a cannon. I
Oh.
was so blown away by it that I said, well, obviously the English program here sucks, and I am not going to be a part of it.
Love that girl
That is
power.
exactly what I did.
However delusional.
Yeah, that's exactly what I did. So I decided, well, I'm not going to be an English major. And that I then spent the next year or so, you know, looking at other majors. Like maybe I'll be a geology major because I was always really into paleontology and archaeology too, though I'm terrible at science. And then I went into a visual communications and I explored, you know, photography, and I bounced around for a bit until I landed on broadcast communications, which of course had a journalism, you know, base. And my one of my journalism teachers at the time was the son of Lincoln Steffens, who was, you know, a huge muckraker in New York
Mhm.
City. And I ended up in broadcasting, and I became really good at it, actually, because it had all the things that, you know, I kind of loved. You know, I was bossy, I was, you know it all. It had writing. I could, you know, I became sort of the top of my class. I was the broadcasting student of the year, the speech student of the year I graduated. So, you know, and then I get these teachers, you know, my broadcast teachers would be like, you know, you're a big fish in a small pond. What's going to happen when you're a small fish in a big pond? You know, arrogance has been my problem my whole life. And, you know, and so I went into broadcast communications.
And did
And
you actually do on the air work, producing work? What were you doing?
I started out doing producing work, which actually I was pretty good at. And
Mhm.
then the jobs that came up after that were photography jobs, were
Mhm.
videography at the time. And there were very few women in those jobs. And so they were easy to fall into because they were, you know, because they were in their way, trying to sort of broaden it. And, you know, because I was a woman in a field that was mainly men, you know, I got hired to do videography. The problem was I just wasn't all that good at it, you know, and I knew it. And I remember sitting around with all these photographers and they'd be talking about how to light something. And I'd be like, wow, I just don't care.
You do care, yeah.
So I did that though for about 6 years before I realized, you know what? I don't want to do this. I don't, it's working in news is completely obsessive and it's all encompassing. It takes up every moment and there's a lot of overtime and, you know, and not only that, I was a woman and I was bumping up against sexism in constant, exhausting ways. And it didn't help that I didn't love what I was doing. So I quit and took a job waitressing.
Really?
And decided that I wanted to be a writer and that's what I was going to do. So I took a job waitressing, which is where I met my husband because he was going to law school, getting ready to go to law school. And sort of then I took a job as a studio manager for a commercial photographer, and that supported me.
How long did it take before you got published? How many manuscripts did you write?
I wrote 5 manuscripts before I got published. From the time I decided I want to work to get published, it took 5 manuscripts in 8 years.
Did any of the 4 ever get published?
One I did, I was trying to get out of a contract and I did revamp it for one of them for, it was a Golden Heart finalist. And so I revamped it and that one did get published. That was A Heart Divided, I guess. Yeah.
So I want to switch over to talk about A Splendid Ruin. I do not have the book to wave in front of me. I hope you do, because I left it in Chicago.
I have it here to wave in front of me.
I remember seeing an early cover of that book. I thought it was such a pretty
It is. Cover. It's a really pretty cover.
Yes. And this is a book, I devoured this sucker. Give your soundbite on what the book's about, and then I'll talk about my viewpoints about this book.
Well, it's about a woman who essentially is betrayed by her family and who gets her revenge during the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. And that's the book in a nutshell.
It is, there are so many things I liked about the book. You know, we were talking about emotion, and I think emotion a lot of times, first, the book is a real page turner, just the plot of it. But the emotions in the book are so strong, and I was thinking about that, and one of the things that makes the emotions so strong in the book is the way you tap into sensory image. You got all 5 senses working in that book. Consciously, unconsciously, what do you think?
Consciously. I mean, you know, I work really hard at that. And I think too, you know, one of the things about wanting to be a writer from the time you're 6 years old, my mom says this to me all the time. She's like, you just watch everything. You take in everything. And it's like you're sort of prepping, you're being prepared. Like you're aware of the fact that, like for me, I'm always aware of smells, you know, and the way things look and the way they feel. And so, you know, it's always sort of trying to get those things in, though description is never like the first thing I hit in a first draft. It's always the kind of thing that gets layered in much later.
Very interesting. So this, by the way, A Splendid Ruin got a starred review in Library Journal. One of the things that I really loved about this book is there is a lot of history in this book, but you handle the research so brilliantly that it never bogs down the plot. And I think that's really, really hard to do. Hold on. The train's coming along, you guys. Talk about, first, while I mute what's going on, talk about what drew you to the story. I'm going to mute.
Well, what drew me to the story was, first of all, I I wanted to do a book about revenge. I had read Balzac's Cousin Bet, which is a book I always really liked. And I was thought the people in that book are so awful and they all deserved exactly what they got. And I thought, God, it would be fun to do a revenge book. And then my agent said, I just never see any books about the San Francisco earthquake. It just seems like there should be one. And my sister was in the Marina earthquake, the Marina District earthquake in 1989 in San Francisco. And I will just never forget her calling me, because we didn't hear from her for hours and we had no idea. She worked in the Marina District and she lived in Oakland. So she could have been anywhere where the really bad stuff was happening, where the bridges were collapsing and all that kind of stuff. And so we didn't hear from her for hours. And I remember when I talked to her and she said she was in her office in the Marina District when it hit. And she said, and everything's falling and the building's shaking. And she said, and my thought was, I'm going to die and it's really going to hurt.
Oh, shoot.
And I thought, oh my God, it was just all the things together, I sort of gelled, and I kind of thought there's some really kind of interesting stuff to sort of deal with there. And then I kind of stumbled across oral histories of people who had lived through the earthquake and their reactions, and this sort of idea that everybody was so stunned in the aftermath and it was so quiet, and this idea of sort of walking living ghosts in the city. And I could imagine that. I could see how you would just be so like, how is this happening? How could this be happening? That I don't know. There was just a lot there to deal with, and San Francisco itself, which is a city I love, and I've been there many times, and I just think it's gorgeous and beautiful. There's just it's always foggy. It's never really hot in San Francisco. It's just such a middle temperate place, and it just felt like at the time too, it was this huge metropolis on the West Coast. It was the biggest city on the West Coast, and the earthquake destroyed it. I mean, after the earthquake, that was when LA started coming up. But before then, it was really San Francisco was the place to be. So after that, people left, and it never really sort of regained its dominance. And it just felt like there was a lot of places to go with that.
I think, and I'm not doing any spoilers here, but I've read books set in the earthquakes, certain scene movies, old movies that were set during that thing. But I saw so many things in your description, so many details that were absolutely fascinating. And I'll just mention one. I don't think it's a spoiler, and it's the tour guides.
Yeah.
But what?
Yeah. That was wild. That was real. Yeah.
So the other thing that I want to talk about is your heroine in this book, Meg, would become, because we have a character in the beginning, Goldie, and we know as a reader that Goldie is up to no good, and she is a terrific villain. Under some circumstances, Meg would be a heroine too stupid to live.
Yeah.
But the thing is, with her, it is so grounded. Her behavior and what she went along with is so grounded in who she is and her desire to have a family. And so as a reader, you're saying, as you turn the pages, no, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But you understand why she's doing this. So this book has sort of traditional Gothic elements in it too.
Mm-hmm. Those are always fun. I mean, obviously, I loved the old Gothics, back from when the 70s, the early 80s, I guess. Oh my God. Yeah. I used to read those constantly. So they're always fun. They're always fun to sort of add those elements and be all creepy and,
I like doing that. We both took that passion for early Gothics, and I turned it into Heroes Are My Weakness, where I tried to pick up all of the stereotypical notions of the of the Gothics from the 50s, 60s, 70s with the creepy house and the, is he a hero or is he a villain? I got to have her running away from the mansion in her bunny pajamas instead of in the negligee. There's a cave. I got to play with all those elements. Your Gothic has some of almost those older Gothic elements too. And I don't want to mention the one that is just a mind blower, but to all of you, I really, if you enjoy historical romance or historical fiction, this book is for you. And I promise you will not be upset by the ending, because I know we're real sensitive. We have to say life's too short to read depressing books. You'll love the ending. Right. Do you do your research as you're going along, or do you do it before you start? Is it just constant?
I do it before I start, and then it is constant also. I mean, you know, for me, so much of the story comes from the research, you know, like I don't really land on a plot until I've done the research, because I want it to be so historically specific. You know, I want it to be something that could not happen anyplace else or during any other time. Yeah. And so much of the story comes from that. And then, you know, as you're writing, things come up and things change. So you're constantly sort of researching as you go along as well. But the bulk of it is really done before.
So let's talk about your process. You are a relatively fast writer once you get your research done, aren't you? Yeah. What's your process look like?
Well, you know, I do the research, and then I do a really fast first draft usually. And
fast. And how ugly is that draft?
It's pretty ugly actually. And you know, I usually throw out most of it, but it gives me some bones to work with.
Yes.
And you know, I can write a first draft, and it's probably pretty common to do it in 4 or 5 months maybe. And after that point, I mean, most of the book comes together for me in editing, and I may throw it out and start over 4 or 5 times, or throw out sections of it. For A Splendid Ruin, I think the first part of it stayed pretty much constant from the beginning to end. The third part of it, I threw out over and over and over again. And in fact, the book was just getting ready to go out to editors and stuff. And my agent was just getting ready to send it out. And I stopped her and I said, you know what? I want to rewrite the third part again. I don't like it. And I did. I threw it out and completely, and I don't mean just a little bit. I completely rewrote the third part. And then I rewrote, it's just, you know, for me, the most fun of writing is never the first draft. It's the revision where it gets closer and closer and closer to where I want it to be.
I love that part. The first draft is just, when I'm exploring, it's just torture. All I want to do is eat.
Yes.
and procrastinate. The book has been, it's been selling like wildfire. That is really exciting.
Yeah, it is exciting.
And by the way, if you wonder why I never take questions, is once I have to switch back to Zoom to do this because of the audio delay, and I can't see the questions. But maybe Megan will go over after this sometime this afternoon or tomorrow and answer any questions that you have. And I imagine usually Assistant Sharon is on. I forgot to talk to her, but she may be posting links for all of you. So before we end, let's talk about what advice you give to writers, newer writers. What do you say?
You know, my best advice actually is to join a group of writers. It's to join, because for me, that was the jump. I remember actually being in Lancaster at my grandmother's house and saying, you know, I want to be a writer. This is what I want to do. And she said, Megan, you need to join a group. And I immediately went home to Washington and looked up whatever. I landed on Romance Writers of America because they had a local chapter in Seattle, which is where I was living at the time. and I joined the local chapter. And from that point on, you know, network, that's where I met, how I met Kristen. That's how I met all of these people. I went to conferences. I learned my craft. I met editors and agents. It just opened so many doors for me. But not just that, it showed me how things were done, and it showed me I learned my craft through these groups, and not just that, it kept me motivated, and you know, gave me a tribe, you know. And I just think, you know, I just think that was invaluable. Just, you know,
You
I don't
find
know.
the right group.
Yeah,
That's key.
yeah,
And many of the Romance Writers of America chapters tend to be writers, generally women, although we have men who are really working at it.
yeah.
And so if you go in a meeting and everybody's saying, oh, I got 4 chapters done since the last meeting, I finished my book, and you're sitting there and you haven't produced anything, it's very motivating. You don't want to
Yes.
go in there without being saying, oh, well, I solved that plot problem. And, you know, you want to be able to be productive. And I think
Right.
that's good. Some of the, some writers groups are filled with a lot of people who think they know what good writing is, and that can get really difficult.
Yes.
It may not be the best place for everyone, and some chapter groups may, also have people who have their own idea of what a romance should be,
Yes,
and that's
it's
not
true.
always useful. So you have to find your proper tribe, and you landed a good one. Those Seattle writers, that's a wonderful group out there.
Yeah, it is. It was a wonderful group, and I was really lucky. But you're absolutely right. And, you know, I mean, there are mystery writers and there are science fiction writers. I mean, there's all kinds. And out here, they have the Pacific Northwest Writers Association, which is all kinds of writers, you know, and that's a good place if you don't really know where you want to be or land. It's a good place to start to meet people.
Terms
But
of
that's the important
Writers
thing.
of America, you can go to rwa.org and click on chapters, and they'll tell you what chapters are nearby. Megan Chance, I have really enjoyed talking to you. Hold up that beautiful cover one more time. A Splendid Ruin by Megan Chance. This is historical fiction with a good ending, and it is a page turner. I think you're all going to really, really love it. So I'll talk to you soon, sweetie. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, Susan. I had a great time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.